Well, welcome back, y'all. Today we're going to be talking about my experience as well as my expenses living in Guatemala City, Guatemala for an entire month. So I'll also be towards the end of the video talking about how I got down there in business class for only a $5 ticket, just $5 out of my pocket. So stay tuned. Alrighty, so those of you guys who are new to the channel, my name is Tommy Boboy. I'm currently traveling throughout the world 1 month at a time, visiting different cities. Now, what I mean by that is I will go into different cities around the world and live there for at minimum 1 month. Now, this gives me a chance to experience the city while also being able to stay consistent and work from my laptop. Now, visitors are coming from all over the world to experience the Mayan culture along with the 30 volcanoes spread across the country. It's known as the birthplace of the Mayan civilization, and it's still a key part of the culture here today, evident by the vibrant clothing style and influence in the Guatemalan cuisine. So there's so much culture to experience here. Now, I got a chance to visit a few parts of the country, talk with the locals, and get a sense of what it's like to actually live in Guatemala City, and this is my experience. Now, going through the airport, the process was super simple and smooth. Now, once I got all my luggage, I headed straight outside to find out how the transportation situation was going to work out. Now, I quickly realized that the city is actually broken down into zones, right? So taxi drivers and even people, when you talk to them on the street, will ask you, what zone of the city are you in? Now, this is a great way for people to get an idea, where you stay, but also for taxi drivers to get an idea how much it's going to cost for them to drive you all the way over there. Now, I quickly realized that taxi was probably not the way to go. Now, I'll definitely talk more about all that here in the transportation section, but I ended up getting an actual Uber that took me straight to my Airbnb, which was in zone 14, so not too far from the airport. Now, this was the first place that I went to when I arrived to Guatemala. Went straight to my Airbnb, and I'll throw up some footage here so you guys can take a look at what exactly or how exactly it looks like. It was actually around 10 minutes from the airport, so it was perfect for me. When I actually got to the location, it was super secure. There was a guy at the front door. They pretty much have to buzz you into the entire building for you to get in, and then you're able to take an elevator up to whatever your floor is. Now, it really felt extremely secure, man. The front attendant guy had a bunch of cameras that he was actually looking at. He could see what was happening on every floor. So if somebody was, walking around looking suspicious or whatever the case may be, he was able to take care of it. And he was there 24/7, which was another dope fact as well. So pretty much at any time of the day, you have to be buzzed in. You can't just walk in. But he saw me coming with my luggage, so he actually opened the front door for me, helped me in. And, throughout my time there, I spent about 32 days, I believe, maybe 33 days there. And it was literally not a second that I felt unsafe there. So it was really dope. It was actually a great location as well. Now, when it comes to the cost, I ended up paying about $1,200, so $1,202.74 for 32 days. That's what it was. My views on the place is that it was a solid place. It had everything I needed in the apartment. I was able to literally cook there perfectly fine, because since I'm here for a month, I'm not going out to eat every single day, right? I actually spent some time. I try to, prepare meals that I like, as well as try to see if I can cook some of the meals that that are actually made there locally, right? So whatever the locals are eating, I try to see if I can make similar meals like that to get an idea of what it's like. On top of that, I had a washer and dryer for my laundry, which was dope. So I was able to do laundry pretty much every week. And I had a great TV setup as well. I had an Apple TV, so I pretty much was able to watch anything I wanted. Another thing that was a game changer that I really appreciated was that I actually spoke with the owner of the Airbnb. As I've gone through this process of, staying at different places a month at a time, I've come to realize what I find important whenever I'm doing this, right? Things that maybe I took for granted at my own place, but now that I'm traveling, it's questions that I need to have, right? Things like AC, kind of like, in a previous video I touched about, my experience in Mexico and how I didn't have an AC at the place where I was staying in, and how now I keep that in mind, right? I always check the weather everywhere I go and make sure, I have an AC unit if it's going to be extremely hot, or I have a heater if it's going to be extremely cold, right? So AC's things that I think about. Another big thing is internet speed, right? When I was in Togo, I had a great experience in Togo, but the internet speed wasn't as fast as I'd like to have, especially when I'm shooting videos and I need to upload or download things, and just generally working from my laptop. So I made sure to reach out to the Airbnb host before I went out there, and she was actually able to increase the internet speed for me before I got there. So that was a huge game changer. I had internet speeds that pretty much rivaled what I get here in the States. And I don't use the bare minimum. I'm somewhere in the middle, if not near the top. So that was great for me. So I was able to shoot a ton of videos there, as well as some videos just to update my credit course, which I'll definitely be talking to you guys about here in the future, if not by the time this video comes out. So the Airbnb was solid. On top of that, I even decided to extend my trip. So I actually ended up staying at another Airbnb for an additional week. Now, this one was located a little bit further east from the one that the Airbnb I was staying at the first time. It was still in zone 14, so I was still in that same area. I was just a lot closer to a lot of the more touristy areas, right? Or the more upscale areas of the city. Now, this one cost me $283.41 for the 7 days. Now, my views on the place, it had really nice views, though I did have issues with the Wi-Fi. I didn't talk with the lady ahead of time about the Wi-Fi just because I was only doing a week there, so I didn't want to make it a big deal. And the Wi-Fi definitely wasn't at the speeds that I would want it at, but I had already uploaded most of the stuff or downloaded everything that I needed before I left my first spot. So all the stuff that I I did during this time, I just pretty much kept it on the drive until I got back home. Now again, this one was closer to a lot of the upscale neighborhoods in the city. I typically don't like to stay near the touristy or upscale areas. I prefer to live, on more the outskirts, if you will. Maybe even you can kind of look at it almost like the suburbs, because it's typically going to be a lot cheaper and I'm able to be more focused. I don't feel like there's a lot, hustle and bustle in the area that I'm in, right? So, that's kind of how I did it with this place. But this place was pretty dope. It was fine. I stayed there for a week and then ended up leaving straight back to the US. Now, I did take a vacation. I'll touch more on that vacation here in a little bit, which I know people laugh at. It's like, it kind of seems like I'm on vacation, so I'm taking like a vacation within a vacation, but that's not necessarily the case, right? I'm actually, typically what I do is I'm working throughout the week, right? I try to go out, after I finish working during the weekdays, and on the weekend is whenever I really have time to go out and do stuff. So I decided to do a weekend where I went out on the lake. So I actually rented out an Airbnb on the lake, and guys, this was one of the dopest Airbnbs I've ever stayed at, man. It was literally on Lake Atitlan. The ride up there was actually crazy, man. And I'll dive a little deeper into that later on again. But it was crazy. It was literally like, the distance would have been in the States. I would say the distance, especially down in the South where I am, where there's not really mountains. There's not as many mountains and things like that, especially in the DFW area. It normally the amount of distance that I covered, it would have taken me, I'd say like 45 minutes, an hour to get where I ended up going from Guatemala City to the area I was by Lake Atitlan. But because you gotta literally go up and down mountains, around mountains, all this stuff, it literally took me 3 hours to get out there, right? But nonetheless, it was definitely 3 hours worth it. So I ended up going to this dope place. I paid $147, and my views, the place was amazing, right? I wish I would have stayed up there even longer, maybe even for a week or so. I talked with the housekeeper, if you will, or the guy who manages the property, and he told me, man, people typically come up there and they just spend a week. A week gives you enough time to just relax. And it was really just so peaceful up there. It kind of felt like a mini vacation where I was just taking time to relax. So there was something that was really dope. Now, if you like that type of content, you're interested in seeing content of, how much it cost me to live in these different locations, or even how I actually managed to get out to these locations really cheap, then be sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any other future videos that I'll shoot as well. Next, let's jump into the food. Like most cities I've been to, there's a range of food options, right? You can get some really cheap food that tastes amazing, as well as some pricier food options that's also good. Okay, so here are some examples. Now, one of the first places that I actually ended up eating food at was the Central Market. Central Market was extremely dope, man. I love that place. People go there to, buy clothing. You pretty much buy anything you need, right? There's people selling all types of stuff there. But I went down there to kind of walk around and visit, and ended up finding some food places to try out. Now, this is where I got my first more authentic Guatemalan meal in that Central Market, which I'll throw up some videos here for you to see as well. Now, the food was really good. It was a soup that put some meat in there. There's a few other things, right? I can't remember exactly all that was in there. I know I put in rice as well. You'll see in the video. And I had avocados. I also got a side of carne asada. So it's basically technically like two dishes. So they had given me a carne asada with the rice, vegetables, things like that. And then they gave me a soup. The crazy thing is, all that food cost me 20 quetzales, which is around, I want to say around $2 to $3, between $2 and $3. So for me, it was a crazy, when I ate that food, right? That's when I realized how cheap the food was going to be here. Not only did I get that dish, it also came with a drink as well, which was enough to top it for me, right? Now, besides that, they also had other types of street food, which is really big. You'll see it a lot in Mexico, Central America, and even South America. They had things called chucos, right? They call it los chucos. And it's pretty much street food that's literally just like a hoagie where they put, you get to choose your selection of meat, and they put like guac, they put vegetables, they put different sauces like ketchup, mayo, spicy sauce, whatever you want in there, right? And I had one of those. Those were really dope as well. And they even had, they sell tacos, which people are typically more familiar with. They sell tacos where you can get different meats that were put in there as well. So all of those were really dope. And I noticed that the prices kind of depended on the location, right? So if you were closer to more touristy locations, then the prices would increase, versus if you were at less touristy locations or locations where a lot of locals were going to eat, the prices were going to be a lot lower as well. The best price that I got was by a shopping mall in my area, where I ended up paying 30 quetzales, which came out to about $3.88 or something around there, which was pretty much for a bunch of tacos that I ate, as well as a chuco that I got to go. Now, another street food that they had, which I tried out, was, they call it rellenitos de plátano, which is basically plantains with beans in the middle. Now, these cost 1 quetzal each, which is like 13 cents. You can pretty much get it on the street. It's more, I think, like a snack or almost like a dessert type of food that they get, because I think they sprinkle even like cacao on top of it, which is pretty much a form of chocolate, right? They put and then they even put sugar on top of it if you want it as well. Now, this one was okay. See, I'm Congolese, so we eat plantains all the time. I love plantains. So it was my first time eating plantains more as like a dessert, whereas we eat it more of like a, it's part of the main course, right? So that was a little different for me. It was still pretty good, but I will always prefer the plantains as the main course. But nonetheless, for 1 quetzal, it was definitely worth it. Now, I went to some other local restaurants. I was able to go to a restaurant that was more in, it was definitely not a touristy spot. Now, throughout Guatemala City wasn't that touristy. Most people go to another smaller city instead of the capital, where it's a lot touristy, and I'm going to talk about it in the excursions section. But this area was, even more so, to where people were looking at me confused what I was doing there, right? And so I ended up finding this restaurant that was a really local restaurant. They greeted me with open arms pretty much and let me in, and I was able to order a meal, or actually ended up getting 2 meals for 40 quetzales, which is like $5, right? And they made something called pupusas, right? So I ordered pupusas, but then ended up ordering another meal pretty much by accident, but both of them came out and I didn't mind, and I ended up eating them. Both of them were super good, super bomb, and it came with a drink as well. So all that for 40 quetzales seemed like a great, a great meal for me. Now, on the higher end, right? In terms of higher end restaurants, I got to use the quotation marks because I don't really go to super fancy restaurants where you're spending like hundreds of dollars per plate or whatever, but this was more higher end than what I was going to throughout my stay. So I went to a restaurant, an Indian restaurant, and it was actually the most I paid for a meal, right? It was a meal for 2. I went with a friend, and the food ended up coming out to 532 quetzales, a little over 532 quetzales, and that was $68.88. Okay, so that was the most I paid for a meal while I was in Guatemala. Also, I went to a barbecue place as well, but y'all know me. I mean, I'm a Texas boy, so the barbecue definitely isn't hidden like the barbecue I'm used to. So it definitely was a barbecue place where it was a different flavor. It was still decent, but it wasn't like the barbecue that I'm typically used to getting. So definitely wasn't a place that I was going to go to more than once. Now, aside from that, I also ate at home again. Like I told you, I'm usually cooking meals at the house, as well as I had ordered, Uber Eats if there was ever times I was at home that I was doing work and I didn't feel like cooking, right? So eating at home, I just shopped at local grocery stores by my house. Prices were typically pretty reasonable. And when it came to Uber Eats, the prices were slightly cheaper than what you would see in the US. I was typically paying between $6 to $10 for my meals. Now, when it comes to transportation, I took a few different modes of transportation. This is one of the places where I was actually kind of, doing different things depending on where I was trying to go, right? I would use different modes of transportation. My main mode of transportation was the bus. It was costing me 1 quetzal just to ride on the bus, and it was able to take me pretty much all the way downtown to a lot of the zones that I wanted to check out. And it made it really easy for me to get downtown, which is what I love. Now, the system is really pretty much similar to any system that you would ride in the States or in Europe, right? You got a little card, you charge your card, and then you just press your card against a reader to be able to ride on the bus, right? For me, it was super secure, and there's always officers or bus workers there to assist you, as well as for security, right? You never really feel like you're in danger or anything like that. Now, I typically use this in combination with bird scooters, right? They had a bunch of bird scooters everywhere, so I would use those bird scooters because the station was, let's say, like 15 minutes from my house. So if I was ever tired, or I had groceries or whatever the case may be, then I would hop on the bird scooter instead of just walking all the way back to the house. Now, besides that, I also had Uber. Now, the Ubers were really cheap as well. My rides usually cost me between $2 to $4, which came out to 7 to 28 quetzales. Okay, about 7 quetzales is usually going to be close to $1. Now, maybe the most that I would spend was like $4.50 or $4.50 if I was going to, like the other side of town every once in a while. But normally the prices were pretty reasonable, right? And it was always a good experience. It's literally exactly what you would expect if you're riding on an Uber in the US or any other country. Now that, I would say, was probably my second mode of transportation after the bus with bird scooter combo. Now, when it came to the bird scooters, I would also use the bird scooters occasionally. Typically what I would do is I would walk around. I much prefer to like walk around. It gives me more time to see the city. But if I was ever tired, or I was in a hurry, or I had a bunch of groceries with me, right? Then I would use the bird scooter to get home a little faster. So normally what I would do is I would walk to the grocery store. The grocery store is about 20 minutes for me. I would walk that 20 minutes, get a bunch of groceries, put it in my backpack, and then ride a bird scooter back to the house. Okay, so bird scooter, the rides typically cost me 7 to 15 quetzales, which was $1 to $2 per ride. Another transportation I took was the rental car. I actually used the rental car to get down to Lake Atitlan. That's that third Airbnb I showed you with the views of the lake. I actually took a rental car and it was totally worth it. I had the rental car for 3 days. I ended up paying about $86 for it, and it was well worth it for me because it gave me a lot more flexibility to be able to move around up there. Now, on top of that, I did spend between 200 to 250 quetzales on gas. That pretty much covered me enough for that 3-hour drive down and back, as well as me moving around, visiting other things on the other days. So another form of transportation that I had taken a few times was something called chicken buses, or down there they call them camionetas. Now, chicken buses are pretty much this, right? We have school buses in the US, right? The public school buses, the yellow buses. Now, after a certain period of time, those buses are decommissioned. They're no longer used by the schools. And what happens is those buses are purchased by people who then drive them down to Guatemala. Now, it's really dope to see how they actually transform the buses. They paint the outsides, they add chrome, all this stuff. They add, speakers, even TVs inside of the buses. And then they use those to give people rides from city to city in Guatemala. Now, I actually rode it from Guate, which is Guatemala City, to Antigua. And it was about an hour-long ride that cost me 20 quetzales, so a little less than $3. Now, the bus rides get crazy, man. Like, they definitely are not driving them the way they're sanctioned here in the US. They're driving those buses extremely fast. We pack those buses with as many people as we can get on there, right? Because for them, that's how they make money. So they're gonna try to fill it up as much as they can. And whenever they're driving and hitting corners, guys, they are going full speed on those things. So on my way back, even from Antigua, they're literally hitting corners, going up and down the mountain areas, the hilly areas, at pretty much full speed with these things. So that was quite an experience. Now, besides that, there is also taxis for people who want to take taxis. Now, I didn't ride the taxis much just because the prices were ridiculously high compared to what I saw with the Ubers. They were easily, 2 to 3 times more expensive. So I highly recommend you just use the Uber app, but there is taxi drivers available if you want to ride those. Now, when it comes to the excursions, guys, I went out to Lake Atitlan, like I mentioned, and that's whenever I stayed out at that Airbnb, and it was much more of a unplug and relax type of trip. So I didn't necessarily do anything touristy per se. It was really just me kind of lounging around, and it felt like a good reset. A lot of times it might seem like I'm just shooting a video here or there, but I pretty much work a lot of times 6-7 days a week, depending on what I got going on, right? So this felt like a good reset for me, a time for me to be able to relax and just kind of get my mind right and think about what I have planned in the future. So after that, another trip I did was Antigua, kind of what I mentioned with the chicken buses or the camionetas, where I took it from Guatemala to that city, Antigua. Now, I actually went there, I want to say 2 times. One, I went there by car. It was kind of, on the way, I just stopped real quick as I was heading to Lake Atitlan. But I also took the chicken bus, and that's where I actually got a lot more time to actually explore. So, this is pretty much the old capital city of Guatemala. Then there was a earthquake and a lot of things in the city got destroyed. So they ended up moving the capital to what is now Guatemala City. Now, I pretty much just walked around the city, which was nice. It has nice cobblestone streets. There's really dope parts of the cities that, just fall. It's directly below a volcano, the city, right? So it's really, you get to see really nice views. There's really nice backdrops. I also did a few tours where they kind of took me a little further and outside of the city to different areas of the city, which was really dope. Now, aside from that, I also went to a place called Altamira. I highly recommend this place if you're in Guatemala City or in Guatemala in general. Now, this was an area with some of the most beautiful views that you're going to see in the area, right? I had to drive about 30-40 minutes from Guatemala to be able to get there, from Guate to be able to get there. And then I paid an entrance fee to enter. I think it was about 25 quetzales. And it has a ton of different areas inside to visit where you're able to take pictures at, and it has really nice views of it's really expansive views where you can see like far distances, but you see the hills and everything like that, right? That's where you're gonna see a lot of the more iconic pictures of Guatemala come from this area, as well as another area similar to this called Obitanango. So I ended up paying 20 quetzales for the parking and 25 quetzales to actually be able to enter. So in total it was about a little less than $6. There was other places in Guatemala City. There's a place called Ciudad Cayala that looks really nice. It's a lot more of an upscale area where they pretty much paint all the buildings white. That area is really nice. But aside from that, there was a lot of things I wish I would have done, but I just ran out of time. I wanted to hike up the volcano called Pacaya, which is a big touristy thing that you're able to do, where you get a tour guide and you hike up there for a couple hours and then hike back down, as well as visit Tikal, which is an area that's really known for the history of the Mayan civilization. They have one of the, or a lot of the big, Mayan temples and things like that are still up that I didn't get a chance to check out. Right. Now, a few final thoughts before I talk about my $5 first class ticket. I did want to say that, it was great to be able to go to a place that's a lot closer to the US, because you're able to see how it's a lot more integrated with the US, right? Where things are a lot more smoother. Not only was I able to use Uber and be able to use the ride scooters, right? Is also that my US phone carrier plan was actually able to work there as well. So I didn't even need to buy a phone plan. I got free data from my US phone carrier that worked perfectly in Guatemala. So pretty much what I did was I used the internet, and then I had WhatsApp as well for if I needed to reach out to people or I needed to give my number to people. Now, when it comes to the bonus, right? How did I go from Dallas to Central America? I pretty much got a business class flight for $5.60. I'll show you a little bit of me spending time in the DFW lounge, where I was able to go and get breakfast, and just relax before my flight. I'll show you even a little video of my flight ticket as well. Now, I was able to do this because I leveraged my rewards points and things like Scotch cheap flights, right? Both of those things are ways that I found to be able to get cheap flights, but this time specifically I used my credit card points, right? And I leveraged my credit card points, pretty much transferred them over to a partner that allowed me to be able to just pay small fees for the ticket, which was at $5. Now, if you're interested in the cards that I use to be able to get cheap flights, be sure that you click the video here to be able to see that exact video. And if you want to see more videos like this, where I talk about my cost of living in these different locations, check out the playlist that I'm gonna put right here as well. Anyways, guys, I thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you at the next one. Peace.